The biting air, a relentless tormentor in the lands, stretching beyond the Mississippi, carried the sharp scent of distant pine and the ghost of snow. Sophia had endured its mournful song for 3 long years, each winter, biting deeper each silence from her husband Jeremiah, growing more profound, a chilling abyss. She had journeyed west, a heart brimming with hope, a prayer book worn soft, and the unwavering conviction of Jeremiah's love. He'd spoken of a nascent world, a canvas for their future, a home, a family's sunsets painting their patch of earth gold. His words, vibrant as a painted sunrise, had lured her from the muted grays of her quiet eastern life. Her hand in his, her dreams yoked to his broad shoulders. Even her sister Martha back home, whose opinion Sophia valued above most, had encouraged her. Her voice bright with conviction over the crackling telegraph wire before Sophia departed. "Go, Sophia, find your happiness. Jeremiah is a good man, steady and true. This is your adventure." Sophia had written to Martha often in those first hopeful months, detailing the vastness of the sky, the challenges of the land, her deepening love for Jeremiah, and her quiet dreams of a child's laughter filling their cabin. The first year was a crucible of arduous labor. Softened by shared smiles, their small cabin rose near redemption, a fledgling town cradled in a valley by a cold, crystalline river. Jeremiah toiled on their claim, his hands transforming into leather, his brow a perpetual map of sweat or melted snow lines, etching deeper with each passing season. Sophia, in turn, made the cabin a home, coaxing a meager garden from the recalcitrant soil. Each night she prayed with fervent hope for the child who would complete their idyllic portrait. But the cradle she'd lovingly smoothed remained starkly, achingly empty. In her letters, increasingly penned with a less certain hand, Sophia confided her growing unease about this emptiness to Martha, who replied with breezy reassurances that felt miles away, both literally and emotionally. "These things take time, dear sister. Don't fret, so enjoy. Jeremiah, enjoy the newness of it all. Your blessings will come." The second winter introduced a subtle frost, not just to the landscape, but into their small haven. Jeremiah's smiles grew sparse, his touch hesitant, then almost entirely absent. His strong hands, once so ready to hold hers, now often remained clenched at his sides or busy with some solitary task. The townsfolk, once effusive in their welcome, now offered furtive glances. Their hushed conversations would abruptly cease when she approached, replaced by stiff nods or averted eyes. The word "barren" reached her once a venomous hiss from behind a cupped hand at Henderson's general store. It struck her with the force of a physical blow, a brand seared onto her spirit. She'd later recall Mrs. Henderson's saccharine, pity her insistence that some things aren't meant to be dear, but a woman's worth is still in her devotion to her husband. Advice that now felt like a deliberately placed stone in her path, designed to trip her. Martha's letters, when Sophia voiced these new hurts, and the creeping dread that redemption held something unseen and unwelcoming for her, became even more dismissive, almost chiding. "You're imagining things. Sophia Town gossip is always cruel. Jeremiah loves you. Focus on being a good wife, on making your home a comfort to him. That is where your duty and your solace lies." The unspoken implication, Sophia felt, was that her failure to conceive was the root of any discord. The third winter descended with a predatory fury blanketing their world in an oppressive shroud of white. The hope Sophia had so desperately nurtured began to shrivel, consumed by a gnawing anxiety that coiled like a serpent in her stomach. Jeremiah was a phantom of the man she'd married. The warmth in his eyes had been snuffed out, replaced by an unnerving coldness that mirrored the frozen desolation outside. He moved with a quiet, measured deliberation that terrified her. His words clipped, rationed like scarce winter provisions. The silence within their cabin grew heavier than the snowdrifts barricading the door, thick with unspoken resentments. she couldn't name but felt pressing in on her from all sides. She tried to bridge the chasm. Her voice a gentle entreaty, her touch a tentative question. But he remained barricaded within himself. Lost in a labyrinth of thoughts he no longer deigned to share. On a night when the blizzard shrieked with the elemental rage of a cornered beast, Jeremiah rose from their shared bed. The fire had dwindled to pulsing embers, painting long, grotesque shadows that writhed upon the rough-hewn walls like tormented spirits. Sophia watched him, a knot of pure dread tightening, constricting her breath. He dressed with excruciating slowness, each movement precise, almost ritualistic. His gaze deliberately avoided hers, as it had for weeks. Jeremiah. She whispered, her voice a fragile tremor against the storm's howl. "What is it? What are you doing?" He turned his face, an inscrutable mask, in the flickering gloom. "Get dressed, Sophia. We need to go out." "Out in this maelstrom, Jeremiah? Are you mad? We'll freeze solid before we take 10 steps. His voice was utterly flat, devoid of inflection of humanity. "Do as I say." A chilling premonition, sharp as an icicle, pierced her. This was not her Jeremiah, not the man whose gentle promises had been her compass. This was a stranger, his eyes reflecting a terrifying emptiness. Her fingers, numb and clumsy, fumbled with the buttons of her warmest clothes, her heart, a frantic bird, battering against the cage of her ribs. He reached for a length of rope, hanging like a coiled snake on a pegs by the door. "Your hands." He commanded, his voice, still that terrifying monotone. "Jeremiah, please, what is this? You're scaring me. Tell me what's wrong." He offered no answer, only seized her wrists, binding them cruelly tight in front of her. The rough hemp bit a fiery brand against her cold skin. A scream welled, but a paralyzing terror choked it back, rendering her mute, immobile. He wrenched open the cabin door. The wind howled its welcome. A savage blast of super-chilled air, extinguishing the last defiant embers, plunging them into near darkness. He dragged her out into the furious heart of the storm, and the snow, 1,000 stinging needles against her face, the ferocious cold, a thief stealing her breath. The forest behind their cabin was a disorienting nightmare of swirling white and skeletal trees clawing at the tempestuous sky. Jeremiah hauled her onward, his grip a vice of iron on her arm. She stumbled repeatedly, her bound hands a useless encumbrance. The snow invading her boots, its glacial tendrils creeping up her legs. Each step was an agony. Each gust a fresh, brutal assault. She begged, she pleaded, a torrent of desperate questions. What had she done? Why this cruelty? But he remained a silent, grim automaton, his face a mask of chilling resolve. The only sounds were her own choked sobs, swallowed by the wind's demonic symphony. He stopped abruptly in a small, comparatively sheltered clearing, where the trees huddled closer, the snow a fraction less deep. He shoved her brutally to her knees, and then she saw it, a stark, dark rectangle against the blinding white, a shallow, unmistakable depression, a grave, a grave. He had dug earlier. The realization struck her with a fresh electrifying wave of terror. This wasn't madness born of the storm. This was premeditated, a calculated execution. "Jeremiah, no." She shrieked, the words torn raw from her throat. "Please, whatever I've done, I am truly sorry. Please don't do this to me." He ignored her, stooping to retrieve a shovel half buried beside the pit. He did not look at her. He did not speak. He simply began to shovel snow and loose frozen earth into the hole onto her, and the frigid, wet weight pressed down first on her legs and then her lap. She writhed a desperate, bucking attempt to dislodge it. But her bound hands were futile. "Why, Jeremiah? Why, I loved you. I gave up everything. Everything for you." He continued his gruesome work, his movements unnervingly steady, rhythmic, like a farmer tending his fields or a man mending a fence. Each shovelful was a new wave of despair, a colder, more intimate embrace of death than the snow covered her thighs, reached her waist, Life leached from her, the cold seeping into her very marrow. Her pleas weakened her sobs, dissolving into the rising tide of earth and snow. So this was her epilogue, buried alive by the man she had blindly trusted her body. An offering to the frozen earth, in an unmarked grave, her existence to be utterly erased. Her failure the barren womb he had so often alluded to. With growing resentment, had with horrifying clarity rendered her worthless in his eyes. Expendable. As the suffocating darkness began to claim her as her struggles waned, and her voice dwindled to a hoarse, rattling whisper, a different shadow detached itself from the swirling snow, larger than a man moving with an almost supernatural fluid grace. Stormcloud of the Jicarilla Apache had been tracking a party of white hunters for 2 days. Not just any hunters, but men known to associate with the more powerful and often ruthless figures in redemption. These men had trespassed onto sacred tribal lands, their rifles' arrogant discharges echoing through the ancient stillness of the winter canyons, a profound desecration. More than this, for many moons, Stormcloud had carried a heavy grief. His younger sister, Nalin, swift as the hawk, her laughter like wind chimes, had vanished near this valley almost a year prior. She had gone to trade fine beadwork, a wedding gift for a cousin, and never returned. The only trace was a single broken strand of turquoise beads, vibrant blue against the desolate earth beads he himself had strung for her on her naming day. He'd found them near a hastily obscured track, leading away from the direction of redemption, a silent accusation he could not ignore. He moved like a whisper on the wind, a spirit of the storm, his senses preternaturally attuned to the subtle shifts in air currents, the faintest indentations in the snow. The blizzard itself was a formidable spirit, yet it could not entirely mask all sounds from an ear so expertly trained. Through the wind's deafening roar, he'd caught it a faint, desperate cry, alien to the wild laden with human suffering. He altered his course instantly, moving with swift, silent urgency. The scene that greeted him in the small clearing sent a chill through him that had nothing to do with the ambient temperature. A white man, his face a rictus of grim determination, was methodically burying a woman. Her muffled sobs were barely discernible now. Stormcloud didn't hesitate. He erupted from the blizzard, a silent avenger. One powerful, precise blow sent the shovel spinning into the darkness. Another, a perfectly placed strike to Jeremiah's temple, sent the larger man sprawling into a deep snowdrift. Jeremiah, stunned, disoriented, reflexively clawed for the hunting knife at his belt. But Stormcloud was faster, his movements a blur. A heavy boot stamped down, pinning Jeremiah's wrist just as the knife cleared its sheath. Simultaneously, Stormcloud's own blade appeared as if by magic, its cold steel kissing Jeremiah's throat. The ground here was treacherous, a thin layer of snow over slick ice. For a moment, Jeremiah thrashed, bucking wildly, nearly unbalancing them both. Stormcloud's moccasin skittering perilously close to the edge of the half-dug grave as he struggled to maintain purchase and control. He recovered instantly, his balance impeccable. A low growl of warning rumbling in his chest. "Do not move." Stormcloud's voice was low, freighted with menace like the rumble of distant thunder presaging a deadly strike. Jeremiah froze his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and primal fear. Stormcloud disarmed him with economical, efficient movements, then he turned his attention to the ghastly mound. With powerful, urgent strokes of his hands, he clawed away the heavy, wet mixture of snow and earth. Sophia was barely conscious, her face a ghastly white, her lips tinged with blue. He gently, carefully drew her free from the icy clutch of her intended tomb, lifting her with surprising tenderness. She was limp, her breathing shallow, ragged. He carried her a short distance, laying her beside the relative shelter of a thick pine, then swiftly shrugged off his own outer fur-lined cloak, wrapping it around her shivering, fragile form. He began to chafe her hands and feet, his touch firm but surprisingly gentle, working to restore the life her husband had tried to extinguish. Sophia's eyes fluttered open. She saw an unfamiliar face, weathered, indomitable, framed by straight black hair. Dark, piercing eyes held a fierce intensity, yet also a profound, undeniable concern. Too weak to speak, too disoriented to fully comprehend, she knew with a certainty that transcended conscious thought that this man was her savior. Stormcloud then dealt with Jeremiah. Cold fury pulsed within him, urging a swift, brutal end. But a different kind of justice was needed here. A truth more deeply buried than Sophia had been. He bound Jeremiah securely with the very rope his prisoner had used on his wife. His knots expert unyielding, he hauled Jeremiah to his feet. "You will come," Stormcloud stated his voice, leaving no possibility of refusal. He retrieved Sophia, who was now weakly attempting to sit the warmth of his cloak, a fragile shield. He lifted her again this time, settling her onto his own horse, a ghostly shape that had waited with preternatural patience in the blizzard. He then hauled Jeremiah up behind her, tying his bound hands to the saddle horn. Leading the horse, the storm still raging, Stormcloud began the trek towards the hidden winter encampment of his people, leaving the shallow, empty grave behind a silent, potent testament to a crime violently interrupted. The journey was a torment for Sophia. Each jolt of the horse sent agonizing waves through her bruised and frozen body. The wind, a malevolent entity, clawed through the heavy cloak, the horrific image of Jeremiah, his face a mask of indifference, as he shoveled snow onto her, replayed relentlessly. Yet through the searing pain and bone-deep exhaustion, a tiny ember of defiance flickered to life. She had survived. She had been dragged back from the very precipice of death. Behind her, Jeremiah was a slumped, defeated presence. His head bowed, she could feel the coarse rope binding him to the saddle horn, a grim counterpoint to its memory on her own wrists. Stormcloud navigated the treacherous, snow-choked landscape with an unerring sense of direction, as if the land itself whispered its secrets to him. He spoke little. Hours later, as the first merciless pale light of dawn filtered through the thinning storm, they reached the Apache camp nestled deep in a sheltered canyon. Smoke from several fires ascended in thin, unwavering columns against the bruised gray sky. Teepees dusted with snow stood like silent sentinels. Their arrival, Stormcloud escorting two white strangers, one clearly a prisoner, caused an immediate stir. Faces curious and deeply wary appeared at lodge entrances. Stormcloud spoke briefly to an elder, his voice calm, respectful, outlining the situation in their fluid tongue. Sophia, weak and trembling, was gently assisted from the horse by two Apache women. Their touch was firm, but unexpectedly kind, and their dark eyes holding a complex mixture of pity and something akin to profound understanding. They led her to a warm teepee where a fire blazed a beacon of life. They removed her wet, frozen clothes, wrapped her in soft, warm furs, and offered her sips of hot, savory broth. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, a fragile tendril of safety began to unfurl within Sophia's battered soul. She was alive, she was warm, she was away from Jeremiah. Jeremiah, conversely, was led to a smaller, isolated teepee under heavy guard. No mistreatment, but no comfort either. He sat on the cold earth floor, hands still bound the crushing weight of his actions, suffocating him. The Apache camp's silence was unnerving, punctuated only by the murmur of voices and the hungry crackle of fires. He'd stared death in the face before, on the trail in saloon brawls. But this was different. This was a reckoning. For 2 nights, Jeremiah was brought before a council of elders, Stormcloud serving as both accuser and reluctant interpreter. The interrogations unfolded by the flickering light of a large central fire, its flames casting stark, dancing shadows on the stern faces of the Apache leaders. Their weapons were not of physical torture, but far more potent, unwavering, soul-searching gazes, incisive questions, and the palpable weight of moral authority. They compelled him to swear on the spirits of the land, on the very truth of his breath, to speak honestly. Initially, Jeremiah was sullen, truculently defiant. He attempted to lie to obfuscate, spinning a desperate tale of Sophia's sudden violent illness in the storm, claiming he was merely digging a snow cave for shelter. She collapsed, seized by a fever. He insisted, his voice strained. I bound her hands to stop her from thrashing, from hurting herself more in her delirium. The digging it was for shelter. A snowdrift can save a life in such a storm. Your warrior misunderstood. He attacked me without provocation. A snow cave dug with a shovel shaped like a grave for one. An elder asked, his voice quiet, but possessing immense authority, cutting through Jeremiah's bluster like a honed blade. Her clothes were barely adequate for a mild chill, let alone a blizzard if she was already sick. Did you choose them for her final journey? Why were her hands bound in front if she was thrashing? Pressed another. His eyes like obsidian chips, unblinking. A sick woman is carried, not dragged by her bonds. My sister Nalin vanished near your town, white man. Stormcloud interjected, his voice laced with cold contempt, his hand instinctively going to the worn leather pouch where he kept her turquoise beads. She was strong, vibrant. Was she too seized by a sudden illness? Did someone shelter her in the earth? What sickness demands a living burial, husband? Does your God bless such covenants of death? Does your white man's progress pave its roads with the bones of women? Jeremiah flinched violently at the mention of Nalin, his eyes darting around. I don't know anything about your sister. I am a God-fearing man. This is a misunderstanding, Sophia. If she could speak, she would tell you I was trying to save her. He pleaded desperately, looking towards the teepee where he knew Sophia was recovering, hoping somehow his words might sway his fate. But Sophia wasn't there to be swayed. The elder's unwavering, penetrating eyes never left him. They grilled him about his life in redemption, his marriage, his standing among the townsfolk. They asked about other women in the town. Were there others whose wombs had also failed to quicken, whose laughter was no longer heard in the valley? One elder whose memory stretched back generations spoke of whispers his own people had heard over many seasons of too many women vanishing from that valley. Their absences too conveniently explained, too quickly forgotten. Under the relentless scrutiny, the unyielding moral pressure, and facing the undeniable prospect of a justice far harsher, far more final than any he had previously conceived. If he persisted in his deceit, Jeremiah began to visibly crumble. The carefully constructed facade of the wronged, desperate husband shattered into 1,000 pieces. On the second night, the dam of his deception finally burst. Filthy tears streamed down his face, carving paths through the grime and sweat. His voice, hoarse and broken, confessed everything he spoke of redemption. Not as a beacon of hope, but as a meticulously constructed charnel house built upon a horrifying secret. He revealed the unholy alliance, a cabal of the town's most respected men. At the very pillars of their small, devout society, Judge Hawthorne, dispenser of solemn justice. Pastor Davies, who preached mercy and righteousness each Sunday from his hallowed pulpit. Wealthy landowners like Mr. Hemlock and Mr. Blackwood, whose sprawling properties were built upon the silent, unhallowed suffering of others. He delineated the unspoken monstrous rule, the cruel calculus that governed their perverted Eden. No heir, no worth, fertile women were assets. Vital cogs ensuring the continuation of land, claims the consolidation of power, the cancerous growth of their twisted dynasty. Barren women, or those who bore only daughters when sons were so desperately craved, became liabilities, inconvenient, a drain, a threat to the meticulously established order. And so they were quietly, systematically erased. It wasn't my idea, I swear it. Jeremiah choked out his body, convulsed by dry, racking sobs. I was told what needed to be done. They all said it was for the good of the community, for progress. They said Sophia. She was holding us all back in anchor, a dead weight on our shared future. He recounted the clandestine meetings held in the shadowed back room of the land office, or in the judge's private chambers after dark under the guise of town planning. He described the payouts, discrete sums of money, favorable land deals, societal approval. For those who carried out these grim, unspeakable tasks, he named names not merely of the conspiracy's architects, but of other men executioners like himself, who had silenced their wives, their sisters, their daughters. He even knew of some of the hidden grave sites swallowed by the wilderness, marked by no stone, remembered by no one except their murderers. He spoke of the whispers, the accepted narratives, women who had simply disappeared or run off with a tinker, or succumbed to a swift illness, with damning suspicious haste. Redemption, it was revealed, was built quite literally upon a graveyard of forgotten women. Jeremiah, in his abject terror and suffocating guilt, had become the unwilling key to unlocking its deepest, darkest secrets. Sophia, slowly regaining her physical strength in the cocoon of warmth and unexpected care provided by the Apache, women was kept informed by Stormcloud of Jeremiah's damning confession. Each revelation was a fresh, agonizing wound, yet paradoxically also a chilling confirmation of the insidious evil she had so narrowly, miraculously escaped. The man she had loved, and the community she had desperately tried to belong to, were rotten to their very core. The intensely personal betrayal now metastasized into a monstrous, systemic conspiracy that had ruthlessly claimed the lives of untold numbers of women, all sacrificed on the altar of land and lineage. In the quiet of her recovery teepee, she reread the letters from Martha, their cheerful platitudes and gentle chidings now feeling like shards of glass. Focus on being a good wife. Had Martha heard more than whispers? Had fear or something colder kept her from voicing a true warning? The thought added another layer of icy desolation. A cold, hard fury began to supplant her fear and grief, crystallizing into a diamond-sharp resolve. These men, these self-proclaimed pillars of society, had played God, discarding women's lives like broken tools. They had offered public prayers for her misfortune of childlessness in church, their faces compassionate masks hiding predatory hearts, while secretly coldly condemning her. Stormcloud, having heard the full, unvarnished confession, sat with Sophia. The fire in her teepee cast a warm, flickering glow on their faces. Jeremiah has named them all, he said, his voice heavy grave. He has shown us the true depths of their wickedness. Sophia met his gaze, her eyes reflecting the restless flames. What will you do with him, with them? My people have their own justice, Stormcloud said, his voice resonating with ancient law. For trespassing on sacred land, for the violence he committed against you on that land, he could face a severe penalty, a final one. But his confession, it speaks of a profound sickness within your own world, a sickness that requires your own world's medicine. Sophia understood. To simply execute Jeremiah here, or even all the men he'd implicated, if they could somehow be caught, would be Apache justice, swift and decisive. But the crimes, the systemic abuse, the corruption of law and faith, the dehumanization of women, this was a virulent disease festering within the white man's nascent society. It needed to be lanced there, judged there, purged there. We cannot bury this truth, Stormcloud. Sophia said, her voice imbued with a newfound strength, a steely, unwavering resolve. Not again. We have to drag it into the light. We have to make everyone see what they have done. A grim, silent understanding passed between them. They would not seek vengeance in the shadows. They would haul this darkness into the unforgiving glare of day. Stormcloud nodded slowly. It will be a dangerous path. These men are powerful in their world, insulated by their positions and wealth. I am not afraid anymore, Sophia declared. And as the words left her lips, she realized their profound truth. The worst had already been visited upon her, and she had survived. They tried to bury me. Now I will help unbury their sins. And so a plan was forged. They would take Jeremiah east, not to the inevitably corrupt local authorities in redemption, but to a federal court, to a higher, hopefully untainted law. Jeremiah, shackled and broken, would be their unwilling, undeniable witness, his confession, their most potent, irrefutable weapon. The journey back towards the more settled territories was arduous, fraught with unspoken tension and palpable danger. Storm Cloud Sophia and their prisoner Jeremiah traveled for days, the specter of redemption's powerful men. Looming, Jeremiah remained bound, a constant visible reminder of his treachery. And the grim purpose of their odyssey, Sophia rode with a quiet, fierce determination, her gaze fixed on the eastern horizon. The frozen landscape, once so hostile, now seemed less a threat and more a harsh purifier. She had faced its worst and emerged scarred, but unbroken. Stormcloud was her silent, vigilant protector, his presence a wellspring of quiet strength. He taught her small ways to read the land, to find shelter, to endure his respect for her. Growing with each passing day, a bond forged in shared trauma, and a singular quest for justice deepened between them, unspoken but profoundly felt. An unlikely trio, the wronged wife, the Apache warrior, and the repentant executioner. As they neared larger settlements, Stormcloud's vigilance intensified. "They will not let him speak," he warned Sophia one evening. As they made a cold camp and the fire kept deliberately small. His words condemned too many men like Hawthorne will act to protect their secrets swiftly and without mercy. His prediction proved chillingly accurate. Days later, as they were navigating a narrow, snow-drifted pass where the canyon walls rose sheer and offered little cover, 4 riders materialized, rifles glinting wickedly in the pale sunlight. "Nar, that's far enough, Apache." One yelled, a hard-faced man Sophia vaguely recognized from the periphery of Redemption's more respectable circles, perhaps one of Hemlock's foremen. "Hand over the prisoner. He belongs to Redemption's justice." "They're Hawthorne's men." Jeremiah croaked from behind Sophia, his voice raw with fear, shrinking down on the horse. Before Stormcloud could reply, a shot rang out, kicking up a spray of snow and ice dangerously near his horse's hooves. He reacted instantly. A blur of motion pushing Sophia low against her saddle horn. "Stay down, Sophia." He barked, drawing his own rifle from its scabbard in one fluid movement. "Cover our flank if you can aim for their horses, if the men present no clear shot." Another shot whizzed past Sophia's head, so close she felt its heat, and a shard of rock from the canyon wall stung her cheek, drawing blood. "I'm hit." She cried out more in shock and startled pain than serious injury, her hand flying to her face. "Just a scratch, I think. There are still 4 of them." She fumbled for the small, heavy pistol Stormcloud had insisted she carry, her fingers stiff with cold and adrenaline. Stormcloud returned fire, his shot echoing sharply, one rider yelping and tumbling from his saddle into a deep drift. He urged his horse behind a jagged, rocky outcrop, pulling Sophia's mount roughly with him, Jeremiah groaning at the sudden movement. "Reload, Sophia, quickly. Watch the high ground to your left." A bullet whipped past his ear so close he felt its passage, and another thudded into the rock beside him, sending splinters flying. He fired again. The ensuing firefight was brief but vicious, a chaotic ballet of flashing muzzles and terrified horses. Stormcloud, using the terrain with an almost preternatural skill he'd honed over a lifetime, outmaneuvered the remaining ambushers. He moved with deadly grace, a phantom in the snow and rock, his rifle speaking with chilling accuracy. One more fell with a choked cry. The last 2, clearly unnerved by his deadly prowess and the sudden violent loss of their companions, wheeled their horses, exchanging a panicked glance, and fled back down the pass into the wilderness. Stormcloud did not pursue. Their priority was reaching Preston with their prisoner and their damning evidence. Shaken but resolute, they pressed on the encounter, a grim affirmation of the powerful forces arrayed against them. Finally, after weeks of grueling travel, they reached Preston, a larger, more established settlement than Redemption, with buildings of brick and stone and an unmistakable air of federal authority. Sophia felt a tremor of apprehension mixed with a burgeoning hope as they rode down the main street Stormcloud, leading the horse carrying Jeremiah's she. Riding tall beside them, people stopped, stared their whispers, a rustling wake behind them. Stormcloud, with Sophia at his side, her face bearing the small healing cut from the ambush, walked directly into the United States Marshal's office. Marshal Elias Thorne, a grizzled veteran with eyes that had witnessed too much human folly and cruelty, looked up from his paperwork, his gaze narrowing at the sight of the imposing Apache warrior, the resolute woman, and the disheveled bound prisoner, Marshal Thorne. Sophia began, her voice clear and steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "My name is Sophia Richards. This man," she gestured to Stormcloud, "is Stormcloud of the Jicarilla Apache. And this," indicating Jeremiah, who sagged between two deputies, Stormcloud had allowed to take his reins at the office door, "is my husband, Jeremiah Richards. We have come to report a series of egregious crimes, murders, and a deep-seated conspiracy that reaches to the highest echelons of the town of Redemption." Marshal Thorne listened, his expression initially unreadable, as Sophia recounted her ordeal, her voice gathering strength with each sentence. Stormcloud occasionally interjecting, a quiet factual clarification, his gaze steady on the marshal. She spoke of the attempted murder, the grave Jeremiah's confession under Apache justice, the names he had laid bare: Judge Hawthorne, Pastor Davies, the wealthy landowners. She detailed the horrifying system of eliminating women deemed barren or inconvenient. The marshal's ingrained skepticism, born of 30 years as a lawman on the frontier, slowly yielded to a grim, focused attention. He'd seen his share of human depravity, but this tale, with its systematic, cold-blooded orchestration by supposed men of God and law, was unparalleled in its scope. He questioned Jeremiah then, who in a low, broken monotone confirmed Sophia's account, adding details of the secret meetings, the justifications whispered in shadowed rooms, the locations of other victims, details only a participant could intimately know. He seemed almost desperate to unburden his blackened soul, the words tumbling out in a torrent of guilt and pervasive fear. By the time he fell silent, his head bowed in utter shame, the small office was thick with a horrified, disbelieving silence. Marshal Thorne leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his weary face, his gaze distant. "Redemption," he muttered, as if tasting something foul. "Always thought there was something. Too quiet about that place, too prosperous, too damn quick." He looked at Sophia, then at Stormcloud, a new respect dawning in his eyes. "This is a damnable, hellish tale. If it's true, it is true, Marshal." Sophia affirmed, her gaze unwavering. "And there are graves that will prove every word." Thorne nodded slowly, his decision made. "I'll need sworn depositions from all of you," he said, looking at Sophia, then Jeremiah. "And you, son," addressing Stormcloud, "your testimony will be crucial, not just about the rescue, but about what your people have observed over the years. We'll dispatch a detachment to Redemption, quietly at first. If what you say checks out, we'll bring every last one of those godless bastards in." The process was slow, painstaking. Sophia gave her statement, reliving the horror, but this time fueled by the nascent hope of justice. Stormcloud provided his stark, unembellished account of the rescued Jeremiah's confession and his own observations about the disappearances, including that of his sister Nolan, her name now officially part of the burgeoning investigation. Jeremiah himself dictated a lengthy, exhaustive confession, detailing the conspiracy's inner workings, the coded language used in their planning meetings, the clandestine signals, and the locations of several unmarked graves he personally knew of or had helped dig. His words, transcribed by a visibly shaken court clerk, painted a damning, irrefutable portrait of Redemption's hidden pervasive evil, Marshal Thorne, true to his word, dispatched a team of trusted deputies, guided by a map meticulously drawn by Jeremiah with specific landmarks only a local would know, and accompanied at a discreet but watchful distance by Storm Cloud, whose knowledge of the terrain and ability to spot signs of disturbance were unparalleled. They conducted their initial investigation with utmost secrecy. They found the first grave, then another, then a third, precisely where Jeremiah had indicated. The exhumed remains of women, long missing their disappearances, conveniently explained away, told their silent, tragic stories. The evidence was undeniable. Horrific warrants were issued. Federal marshals descended upon redemption, not as welcome guests, but as avenging agents of a higher law. Judge Hawthorne was arrested mid-sentence in his own courtroom, his gavel falling silent, his face paling to a sickly gray. Pastor Davies was taken from his pulpit, just as he was invoking divine forgiveness. His sermon left jarringly unfinished, the Bible slipping from his trembling hands. Hemlock and Blackwood were apprehended on their vast, ill-gotten estates, their indignant protests of innocence and threats of legal reprisal ringing hollow against the mounting, irrefutable evidence. Redemption built on secrets and bones was thrown into utter turmoil. The men who had wielded absolute power, who had arrogantly decided who lived and who died, were abruptly stripped of their authority, their dark deeds dragged into the harsh, unforgiving light of day. The trial, held in Preston's federal courthouse, became a national sensation, drawing reporters from as far east as Chicago, their dispatches painting lurid pictures of frontier barbarity hidden beneath a veneer of piety. The courtroom was packed daily. Sophia, a figure of composed dignity and quiet strength, sat in the front row, her presence a constant silent accusation. Storm Cloud was often present, a stoic, watchful observer in the corner of the room, his presence a powerful reminder of where this arduous journey to justice had truly begun. One by one, the accused men were brought to face the overwhelming evidence. Jeremiah, a shadow of his former self, his face etched with sleepless nights and a profound, consuming guilt, was the prosecution's star witness. He stood in the witness box, a broken, haunted man, and recounted the full, horrifying saga of the redemption conspiracy. He named names, detailed methods, and described the callous disregard for human life that had been the town's secret currency, its dark foundation. He described the initiation, how Hawthorne had approached him after Sophia's second year of childlessness, speaking of community good and necessary sacrifices for progress. His testimony was devastating, unshakable, laying bare the insidious no heir, no worth philosophy that had been systematically ingrained, twisting men, himself included, into monsters. Several times he broke down, unable to speak, but the prosecutor gently yet firmly guided him back to the terrible truths. When Sophia took the stand, a profound hush fell over the courtroom. She spoke of her innocent love for Jeremiah, her fervent hopes for a family, and the crushing weight of her childlessness, a burden made heavier by the subtle, insidious judgments of the community. Then, her voice trembling at first, but gathering firmness, she recounted the blizzard night, the terror of being dragged into the woods, the unspeakable horror of the shallow grave, the cold earth and snow suffocating her. She looked directly at the men who had once offered her false sympathy, the judges and preachers who now sat as the accused, their masks of piety stripped away, revealing the predatory calculations beneath. This time, it was they who trembled, their faces ashen. They tried to bury me. She stated, her voice ringing with a quiet, undeniable power that filled the chamber. They deemed me worthless because my body did not bear the fruit they desired for their dynasty, because I could not give them an heir to inherit their blood-stained land. But they were profoundly wrong. No life is worthless. No woman is expendable simply because she does not fit a man's design. Her words resonated through the courtroom, a powerful, unassailable indictment of the accused and the twisted, misogynistic values they embodied. Stormcloud, listening intently, felt a profound respect for her raw courage, for her extraordinary ability to transform her personal suffering into a universal demand for justice. Not just for herself, but for all the silenced, forgotten women, including his own. Nolan forensic evidence from the exhumed graves was presented stark and irrefutable. Pathologists detailed findings consistent with suffocation with prior injuries. Dozens of missing women were accounted for, their stories finally pieced together from Jeremiah's testimony, recovered journals found in abandoned cabins, and the investigators' grim findings. Land records meticulously scrutinized revealed the systematic consolidation of property into the hands of Hawthorne Hemlock Blackwood and their associates following these women's disappearances. The intricate web of corruption and murder was laid bare for all to see. A letter arrived for Sophia midway through the trial, postmarked from her eastern hometown. It was from Martha, several pages long, and the handwriting shaky and tear-blotted. It was filled with anguished apologies, convoluted excuses, and a confession of her own. Dearest Sophia, I read the papers, what they are saying about redemption, about Jeremiah. It's a horror beyond imagining. I must confess, I heard whispers. Sophia, more than whispers, from a cousin of Jeremiah's, who passed through last year. He spoke of a harsh custom in redemption. For women who didn't provide, I was afraid. Terrified for you, but also for myself. For what might happen if I stirred such a dangerous nest, I didn't know what to do. I told myself it was just rumor that Jeremiah wouldn't. I tried to subtly warn you in my letters to be a good wife, hoping that might protect you. I see now how foolish, how cowardly I was. I let my fear make me complicit in my silence. I never imagined the true monstrous extent of it. Can you ever forgive me for not screaming the alarm? Sophia folded the letter slowly, the paper crinkling in her trembling hands. Another betrayal born perhaps of fear, not malice. But it added a somber, painful note to the hard-won justice Martha, her own sister, had known enough to voice a real warning, but had chosen vague platitudes and placations. Another layer of darkness, another strand in the web of silence uncovered. The verdicts came with damning swiftness. Guilty Judge Hawthorne, Pastor Davies Hemlock, Blackwood, and several other prominent men of redemption were convicted of conspiracy. Multiple counts of murder and a litany of other charges, and the sentences were severe, reflecting the profound depravity of their crimes. Hangings for some, life imprisonment for others. Justice, it seemed, had finally belatedly come to the Poisoned Valley. Land wrongfully acquired was where feasible returned to distant relatives of the victims or held in trust. Redemption itself began to crumble, its foundations of lies and murder irrevocably exposed. Some residents moved away, unable to bear the consuming shame. Others stayed resolute in their determination to rebuild, to forge a new community based on genuine values. Not on cruelty, greed, and the spilled blood of innocents. Jeremiah, for his instrumental role in the crimes, and his subsequent full cooperation, received a lesser, though still substantial, sentence. He would spend many years in a federal penitentiary, haunted by the specters of the women whose lives he had helped destroy, and by the indelible image of the wife he had so monstrously tried to bury. Before being taken away, he requested to see Sophia one last time. They met in a small, starkly guarded room. He looked years older, his face deeply etched with remorse, his shoulders permanently stooped. "Sophia," he began, his voice thick, choked with emotion. There are no words, none that can truly say how profoundly sorry I am for what I did to you. For everything." Sophia regarded him, the man she had once loved with all her heart, the man who had betrayed her so utterly, so terribly. The anger still resided within her, a deep, cold ember, but it was now tempered by a weary, profound sadness. "You dug one grave for me that night, Jeremiah," she said softly, her voice surprisingly gentle yet firm. But in doing so, you unwillingly unearthed a whole town's worth of sins, perhaps. Perhaps that can be the painful start of your atonement. Live with that truth. He nodded, tears welling tracing paths down his ravaged cheeks. I will carry this truth with me, always. As will I. Sophia replied, but I will also carry the memory of all the women who were silenced, and I will strive to live a life that honors them. There was nothing more to say. He was led away. Sophia watched him go, a chapter of her life definitively closing. A heavy, agonizing chapter, but one that had, against all odds, culminated in a measure of hard-won justice. In the years that followed, Sophia did not return east, and the West, despite its inherent harshness and the profound trauma it had inflicted, was now indelibly her home. She had discovered within herself a quiet, unyielding strength she never knew she possessed. Stormcloud and his people had offered her a place among them, a gesture of profound respect and kinship, but she knew her path now lay in bridging the two disparate worlds, in working to ensure such horrors were never repeated. She collaborated with Marshal Thorne and others, advocating for the rights of women on the frontier, for stronger legal protections, for a society where a woman's intrinsic worth was not measured solely by her capacity to bear children. She and Stormcloud remained connected by the unbreakable, unspoken bond of what they had endured and achieved together. Their relationship was one of deep, mutual respect and quiet, enduring affection, a companionship that transcended cultural divides. He told her finally the full story of Nalin, of her bright spirit, his desperate year-long search, and how finding Sophia alive in that shallow grave fighting for breath had somehow given him a terrible, urgent direction for his grief and anger, a way to seek justice not just for Nalin, but for the pattern of cruelty she represented. Her grave, sadly, was one of those exhumed on land, claimed by hemlock, marked now by her name, and the broken turquoise he had kept. Every spring, when the snows finally receded, and the first tenacious wildflowers unfurled their colors against the recovering land, Sophia and Stormcloud would ride out to the sites where the forgotten women of redemption had been unceremoniously buried. The graves were now properly marked, most with simple wooden crosses, some with names, others simply as Unknown Woman Remembered. Together, they would plant white columbines for endurance and sego lilies for sustenance and remembrance, on each one symbols of purity retained, despite defilement of lives unjustly, brutally curtailed. On Nalin's grave, Stormcloud would gently place a new whole turquoise stone, a prayer whispered on the wind, beside a particular stretch of reclaimed land near the very spot where her own ordeal had commenced. A different kind of marker was eventually placed. It was a simple, unadorned stone commissioned by Sophia herself, its words etched deep and true. She and Stormcloud together, using his sharpest knife, carefully deepened the carver's lettering, and then with a smaller, finer blade, they etched the delicate outline of a sego lily beside the last word, a shared act of dedication. It did not bear a name, but a message, a stark epitaph for an era, and a warning for the future. It read, "One grave, dug in malice, uncovered a town's sins. May we always choose to drag darkness into light." The wind still whispered its ancient song through the tall grasses of the west. But now for Sophia, it carried not just a lament for what was lost, but also a hymn of resilience, of justice achieved, and of the enduring, indomitable strength of the human spirit to confront unspeakable evil. And to choose always to remember the land bore its scars, as did she, but it also bore the vibrant promise of healing, of new untainted growth, a testament to the lives that had been courageously reclaimed from the suffocating silence.